In my last life, my husband chose to be matched with my best friend, but she rejected him to go with the university's top handsome guy who she thought was rich, so my husband settled for me. Then he cheated with my scheming best friend years later, and because I chose to divorce him, their scandal was exposed. He lost everything. My best friend also lost her acting career and was dragged by the whole internet. They came to ask me for money to pay for my best friend's breach of contract, and when I refused, I was pushed to my death. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting at a round table, familiar faces all around me. For a second, I thought death had a sense of humor. The hotel hall was washed in warm golden light. White ribbons hung from the ceiling. Someone was laughing near the drinks table. A banner from our university's one-year alumni gathering was pinned high behind the stage, the same ugly shade of burgundy I had mocked in my head the first time I came here. The same round table, the same cheap floral centerpiece, the same soft instrumental music in the background, and beside me sat Gloria, alive, beautiful, scheming. My fingers tightened around the stem of my juice glass. I knew this place. I knew this moment. This was the night everything had started, the matchmaking game. A stupid reunion gimmick our former class president had come up with because two of the most handsome young men in our department had shown up in tailored suits and caused half the girls in the hall to forget how to breathe. James Hart, Alex Rowan. In my last life, this had been the night I had blushed so hard my cheeks hurt. The night I had thought fate had finally looked my way. The night I had believed that perhaps my years of quietly loving James from afar might amount to something. Instead, it became the starting line of a disaster that ended with blood on my sitting room floor and my little boy crying in the next room while I could no longer move. Lily, Gloria's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up. She was watching me with wide, innocent eyes, the exact expression she had used all through university whenever she wanted something from me and wanted the world to think she was too pure to ask. "You look pale," she said softly. "Are you okay?" If I hadn't seen her kneeling on my carpet in my past life, clutching my hand and pretending to beg while waiting for James to snap, maybe I would have believed her concern. If I hadn't seen the way she watched me bleed then looked away so she could admire the jewelry James was stuffing into his pockets, maybe her face would still have worked on me. But death had a way of washing affection clean off old memories. I smiled. "I'm fine, just amused." Her brows lifted. "Amused?" "Yes," I said. She didn't understand me. She wouldn't, not yet. At the head of the table, our class president clinked a spoon against his glass and called for attention. "Everyone settle down. Since we're finally all here, let's start the fun part." A chorus of cheers and teasing whistles rose around the room. The fun part, that was what they had called it, a public game. Two handsome bachelors, two women in our department with the highest votes from old classmates, one playful question: if the chance were given, who would you like to date and eventually marry? Back then, everyone thought it was harmless. I had thought so too. Now I knew better than anyone that lives could turn on ridiculous little moments dressed up as jokes. "Let's start with James," the class president announced. The room erupted immediately. James adjusted his posture, still exactly as I remembered him at 23. Good shoulders, easy smile, the kind of handsome that looked warmer than it was. In my last life I had spent years mistaking his softness for decency. It turned out that a man could speak gently and still ruin you. My heart did not race this time. That was how I knew I was truly free. Beside him sat Alex. Even before my eyes fully landed on him, I felt it, the strange, old ache that had never made sense in my past life. He was taller than James, quieter too, with sharp brows and a reserve that made people misread him as aloof. He wore black like he had signed some private contract with shadows. In university, girls had called him the cold prince of the department. Gloria had called him her jackpot. In my past life, I had barely looked at him that night. I was too busy waiting for James to look at me. This time, the moment my gaze met Alex's, something in his expression shifted. It was very small, so small that no one else would have noticed. The class president grinned wickedly. "James, if you had to choose between our two department beauties, Lily and Gloria, who would you pursue?" Laughter broke out. People started chanting for answers. In my past life, this was the point where James had looked at Gloria and chosen her. Gloria, after hearing rumors that Alex might have ties to a noble family, had immediately rejected James and declared an interest in Alex instead. Then, smiling like a saint, she had exposed my feelings for James in front of everyone and pushed him toward me. To save face, and because I was considered the prettiest girl in our department, James had agreed with charming reluctance. That careless little arrangement became a marriage. That marriage became a grave. This time James didn't even hesitate as he said, "I am a bro keeper." I noticed Alex has had his eyes on Lily all night, so I won't sabotage his plans. I'll go for Gloria, she's caught my attention after all. The answer sent the room into a boisterous laughter. A ripple of cheers and teasing hollers went through the hall. I kept my face still, but inside I went cold. So he was reborn too. Of course he was, or else he wouldn't have been quick to throw me over to Alex. Only a reborn James would answer so fast, so neatly, as though correcting an old mistake. My eyes slid to Gloria. A rosy blush climbed her cheeks, but the light in her eyes was not maidenly shyness. It was calculation, triumph. Surely she was reborn too. Suddenly the whole scene sharpened. The two of them weren't improvising. They were choosing each other on purpose, trying to seize the future they believed they had already seen. How touching, how stupid. The class president laughed. Straight to the point, Gloria, what do you think? Gloria smiled with perfect timing, one hand rising to touch her chest as if flustered by the attention. Senior James is very outstanding, she said softly. And I've always admired both him and Alex, but if I'm being honest, my feelings for James are more romantic. Several girls squealed. Someone shouted that this was like a drama. Gloria lowered her lashes, then turned her head just enough for the room to also notice me. I only hesitate because Lily, there it was. Even reborn, she couldn't resist making sure I was dragged into the middle. Lily has liked James for a long time, Gloria continued in a helpless tone. I don't want to take away my best friend's happiness. A wave of attention crashed over me. In my past life I had burned with humiliation at a similar kind of performance. I had been too young, too soft, too in love, too grateful when James had eventually looked my way. Now I only felt contempt, because Gloria had always been the same. She wanted what I wanted. And once she took it, she wanted the world to praise her for sacrificing it. In my last life, she had heard a rumor that Alex was connected to nobility and taken him from the table before pausing to wonder whether his heart had already chosen someone else. Then she had spent years despising the marriage she fought to get, cheating on him while enjoying the quiet advantages his name brought her. This time, she knew James had risen higher than Alex in our past life's visible story, so now she wanted James instead. Never mind that his rise had been built on my back. Never mind that without me, James was just a man with a decent jawline and ambitious appetite. Never mind that Alex, the man she had dismissed as a poor husband, had actually been the hidden heir to one of the country's most powerful military families, later taking over a top conglomerate and quietly owning the entertainment company that had made her acting career flourish. She knew none of that, and James knew even less. I nearly smiled. The joke really was on them. James turned toward me with a theatrical trace of guilt, clearly expecting me to play my old part. Perhaps he thought I would look wounded. Perhaps he hoped I would still want him enough to make his current choice seem more valuable. Instead, I set my glass down and stood up. Don't worry, I said calmly. I don't plan on getting into a relationship with anyone. The room went oddly still. That was not the line I had spoken in my past life. Gloria blinked. James's smile faltered. I let a small sadness enter my face, just enough to look believable. So no one has to be concerned about me. I said it before Alex could speak. That part was intentional. I had only just escaped one doomed marriage. I wasn't about to step into another because fate suddenly looked embarrassed. The class president laughed awkwardly. Come on, Lily, don't be so serious. Alex hasn't even answered yet. Before I could sit, Gloria moved first. She's just hurt, she said quickly, like the kindest person in the room. Lily has always had a soft heart. James, maybe you should explain. I don't want her misunderstanding anything. There it was again, the nudge, the public steering, the calculated pity. James stepped into it immediately. Lily, I never meant to embarrass you, he said, his tone warm and regretful. You're wonderful. Anyone would admire you. My feelings for Gloria are different. Murmurs spread through the tables. Now the story was taking shape exactly how they wanted it. Poor Lily. Secretly in love, rejected in public, still lingering between two men, the kind of woman people judged before they knew anything about her. I could almost hear the whispers preparing themselves. Then Alex cleared his throat. The sound alone silenced the hall. He didn't rush, he didn't smile. He simply looked at me with a steadiness that made my throat tighten. I do have feelings for Lily, he said. No hesitation, no performance. Just truth laid cleanly across the table like a drawn blade. The room exploded. Someone gasped, someone clapped. A few girls started squealing again, but I heard none of them clearly, because my mind had gone blank for one dangerous second. His sentence struck some old, hidden place inside me. In my past life, Gloria had often mocked me in subtle ways after marrying Alex. She would laugh and say I could never understand what it meant to be chosen over someone else. She would mention how difficult it had been to melt a heart that had once looked in another direction. I had assumed she was boasting about women before her, or just feeding her own vanity. It had never occurred to me that the person she meant was me, that the person she had boasted about usurping in Alex's heart was me, that all those years, while I was exhaustingly in love with James, another man had quietly stepped back and let me go where he thought I wanted to be. Alex's gaze didn't leave my face. But if her heart belongs elsewhere, he said, voice low and even, I won't force her. A strange pressure rose in my chest. Was he reborn? Was this a confession from memory or one from the present? I couldn't tell. And that uncertainty unsettled me more than either answer should have. So I folded my hands in front of me and said carefully, thank you, but I need time to think before entering any relationship. It was polite enough to offend no one. Unfortunately, no one at that table had ever been willing to let me leave cleanly. Gloria reached for my arm. Lily, maybe this is for the best, she said in a voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. You should really take your mind off James. If you keep holding on to him, people might misunderstand. A few heads turned harder toward me. I looked at her hand on my sleeve, so this was her angle now. If she couldn't win by seeming generous, she would win by painting me as pathetic. James added with exactly the right amount of discomfort, I hope this won't affect our friendship, Lily. Friendship. I almost laughed in his face. This man had once taken the savings I built from overtime and sold the ancestral land my father left me just to host dinners, pay bribes, fund investments, and complete projects in his name. I had polished his reports, corrected his mistakes, fixed his meetings, pushed opportunities into his hands until his superiors saw him as indispensable. While I climbed only to team manager, he rode my labor upward and accepted every congratulation as if talent naturally flowed through him. Then he slept with Gloria behind my back, then he slapped me, then he watched me die, and now he wanted friendship. I gently removed Gloria's hand from my sleeve. There's nothing to misunderstand, I said. You've made your choices, I respect that. I hope everyone else can do the same. I sat down, it should have ended there, but people were already whispering. I caught pieces. Gloria lowered her eyes like a woman burdened by too much empathy. I looked at her and finally understood something that had always bothered me in both lives. Gloria did not merely want good things. She wanted witnesses. She wanted people to see her taking them, and I once upon a time had been kind enough to let her, not anymore. I stood before the meal even began. Excuse me, I said, I need some air. No one stopped me, not physically, but I could feel their eyes following me all the way out. The corridor beyond the hall was blessedly cool and quiet. I walked until the noise dimmed behind the doors, then braced both hands against the wall and closed my eyes. Alive, I was alive. That single fact still felt unreal. My head should have been broken. My son should have been crying for me. My blood should have been drying between the grooves of my floorboards. Instead, I was here, back before the marriage, before the divorce, before the virus report I had stared at with shaking hands 1 minute before hell arrived at my front door. Before James and Gloria cornered me and demanded money to pay off the entertainment company's compensation claim after their scandal broke. Before I learned in one brutal afternoon that James's affairs had not only cost me my marriage but had likely infected me too. I swallowed hard. Lily, I turned. Alex was standing a few steps away. Of course he had followed. For a moment neither of us spoke. Up close he looked exactly the same and not the same at all. In my past life I had learned his face too late, in boardrooms, in headlines, in shocked revelations after my divorce, when I first realized the quiet man Gloria belittled was neither ordinary nor powerless. After I took the vice president position that should have gone to James, I met Alex at a business event and saw something unreadable pass through his eyes when he looked at me. I thought it was discomfort, maybe old recognition through Gloria. Now I wondered if it had been grief. Are you all right? He asked. I almost said yes out of habit. Instead I asked, why did you say that in there? His expression barely changed. Because it was true. Simple answer, dangerous answer. I leaned back against the wall studying him. You don't even know me. A faint shadow crossed his eyes. I know enough. That made my pulse skip. Was it enough from this life or enough from the last one? I couldn't ask directly. Not here, not yet. So I said, thank you for stepping in, but I meant what I said. I don't want a relationship right now. He nodded once, too easily. Then I can wait. I stared at him. He said it as if time was something he had already lost once and didn't mind spending carefully this time. I looked away first. That was irritating. You're very sure of yourself, I muttered. No, he said, I'm sure of you. There was no flirtation in it, no playful arrogance. Just a level certainty that unsettled me more than charm ever could. I folded my arms. That sounds suspiciously rehearsed. To my surprise, something close to amusement touched his mouth. If I were rehearsing, I'd say something smarter. I almost smiled. Almost. But then the memory of my child's face flashed through me, and whatever softness might have gathered immediately hardened again. I appreciate your concern, I said, but I need to handle my own life. His eyes dropped briefly as if the phrase had struck somewhere personal. When he looked back up, his voice was quieter. I know I should have left then. Instead, I asked the one reckless question I couldn't stop from slipping out. Do you? For the first time, Alex's stillness cracked, only for a second, only enough for me to know I had not imagined the recognition in his eyes. Then he said carefully, "More than you think." My breath slowed. There it was, not an answer, not a denial either. A gate half opened. I decided not to push it wider yet. Good night, Alex. Good night, Lily. I walked away before my face could betray too much. But all the way home, one impossible thought sat beside me like a second passenger. He remembered too. And if Alex remembered too, then fate was really put up a comedy to amuse itself. Alex watched her leave with his hands curled quietly at his sides. He had imagined this moment too many times in too many ways. In the life they had already lost, he had stood in rooms full of people and trained himself not to look at Lily too long. He had watched her smile at James with open affection and had told himself over and over that love was not ownership, that if her happiness pointed elsewhere, then his place was to step aside. He had done exactly that. He had rejected Gloria at first, politely but clearly. Then Gloria had used Lily's name, her closeness to Lily, her seeming softness, to continue appearing in his path until even refusal began to look cruel. By the time family expectations and public pressure tightened around them, marriage became the most responsible answer. It was the worst mistake of his life. He married a woman who wanted his future but despised his present, a woman who betrayed him with James while still wearing his ring. A woman who smiled at him while secretly poisoning him, slowly damaging his body because she had no intention of bearing children for what she believed was a poor husband. How devastating that he had only found out when it was too late. And Lily died before Alex could repair any of the distance he had once respectfully kept. When news of her death broke, something inside him tore beyond language. He had ordered James and Gloria tracked before dawn. By the time they were caught trying to flee the country with money from Lily's sold properties, he had already begun moving through the world like a man functioning after the center of himself had gone missing. The accident that followed was one he would never forgive himself for. Lily's child had been in the car, adopted as his after Lily's death, but Alex, distracted by grief and rage and too many sleepless nights, failed to react 1 second fast enough. 1 second. That was all fate needed. Now she was alive again. Alive, wary, stronger, and looking at him with the distant caution of someone who had learned the price of misplaced trust. He did not blame her. He would spend this whole life earning what he had lost in the last one if he had to. And if James and Gloria wanted to rush toward their own destruction without understanding why, Alex was more than willing to step aside and let gravity do its work. Nevertheless, he would add to their destruction and make sure it was more horrible than it would have turned out to be. Lily was one thing he would not let go of again, not this time. The next few weeks taught me 2 things. First, reborn idiots were still idiots. Second, freedom felt suspiciously like silence before a storm. James and Gloria started dating publicly almost immediately. No one was surprised. After their dramatic little exchange at the reunion, everyone had already begun speaking of them as though fate itself had finally corrected an old misunderstanding. People messaged me pretending to be kind. It amazed me how eager people were to assign a woman a wound and then advise her on how prettily to carry it. I ignored all of them. Instead, I threw myself into work. In my last life, I had spent my sharpest years trimming myself into a support beam for James. This time I used every spare hour for myself. I stayed late to understand systems beyond my team. I studied financial structures. I rebuilt old contacts. I refined project proposals under my own name instead of polishing someone else's mediocrity until it looked impressive. At first it felt strangely selfish. Then it began to feel delicious. James, meanwhile, floated through his office with the same easy confidence he had in our past life, only this time without me behind the curtain correcting his timing and cleaning his errors. He still knew which senior executives liked flattery. He still knew how to talk big in meetings, but I could already see the cracks. He forgot details, missed follow-up documents, overpromised deliverables. He had memories of success, yes, but memories were not skill. And the skill had always been mine. One afternoon I passed the pantry and heard 2 colleagues whispering. I thought James would be promoted faster by now. Same. He talks like management is already in his pocket, but his last proposal had holes all over it. I kept walking, hiding my smile. Meanwhile, Gloria entered the entertainment industry earlier than she had in our past life, apparently determined to speedrun her imagined destiny. She posted polished photos online, attended casting dinners, and hinted about influential support without ever naming Alex directly. She had always liked building castles out of implication. And Alex appeared with maddening steadiness, not aggressively, not in a way anyone could call inappropriate, just persistently. Coffee left on my desk after difficult meetings, a forwarded article relevant to a project I was handling, a brief message asking if I had eaten lunch. An invitation to a lecture, a ride offered on rainy evenings, only gesture small enough to not refuse yet enough to remember. Still, I refused some, accepted others. He never complained either way. That was the problem. Had he been more forceful, I could have been colder. Had he been flirtatious, I could have dismissed him. Instead, he moved around me like a man who understood damaged spaces and had no intention of stepping where I had not cleared ground. Which made him dangerous in a completely different way. One Friday evening, I found him waiting by the office entrance. "You're becoming a habit," I said. "Is that a complaint?" he asked back boldly. "It's an observation." "Good," he said. "I prefer those, they're harder to lie with." I gave him a look. "Do you say cryptic things on purpose?" "No, that's just what happens when I'm trying not to say other things." I should not have enjoyed that answer. Unfortunately, I did. We walked to the parking lot together. The night air was cool. Cars moved past the main road in slow lines of light. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "How's Gloria?" His head turned slightly. "Ambitious," he said. "Dissatisfied, performing happiness with a lot of effort." That sounded exactly like Gloria. I slipped my hands into my coat pockets. "And James?" Alex sneered disdainfully, still convinced the world owes him acceleration. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Alex looked at me, then really looked, and something softened in his face as though that small sound meant more to him than it should have. I immediately grew cautious again. He noticed, of course he did. "Lily," he said quietly, "you don't have to decide anything because of me." I met his eyes. "Then what do I have to do?" "Live differently this time." The sentence went straight through me. This time, there it was again, another half-confession. I stopped walking. He stopped too. The parking lot felt suddenly too open, too exposed for the conversation balancing between us. "You're not subtle," I said. "Neither are you." He retorted. I argued I haven't said anything. Yet he knew just how to retort that exactly. "You're usually very careful with your words when you're hiding something important," he said. My pulse kicked once hard. I should have denied everything. I should have protected myself longer. Instead, I heard myself say, "And what am I hiding?" His gaze held mine. "That you've already buried one life." For a moment I could not breathe. The parking lot vanished. The present thinned. All I could hear was the roaring inside my own skull. Then I whispered, "You remember?" His jaw tightened as he said a small yes. The word landed softly and changed everything. I looked away first because if I didn't I might do something humiliating like cry in a corporate parking lot. Silence stretched between us, but it was not empty. It was crowded with all the things that had once gone unsaid. His first life, mine, the marriage we never had, the child I lost, the grief we were both still hauling around under cleaner clothes. Finally I said very quietly, "My son died." Alex closed his eyes, only for a second. When he opened them, the restraint in his face was almost painful to look at. "I know," he said, "you don't understand." My voice shook despite my best efforts. "I remember everything. His little shoes by the sofa. The half-finished drawing on the table. I remember hearing him call for me from the bedroom while I couldn't answer. I remember," I broke off. Alex stepped closer, then stopped at a distance respectful enough to still feel unbearable. "I know," he repeated, and this time there was something raw in it. "And I know what happened after." I stared at him. He looked like a man preparing to cut his own chest open. "After James and Gloria were arrested," he said, voice low, "I adopted your son. I was driving one evening. I thought a drive would calm both of us. I don't know what I thought. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't thinking clearly. And I made one mistake. I didn't look properly and drove off a cliff." The world around me seemed to recede. There it was, the missing piece of the grief I had never gotten to live long enough to understand. In my past life, I died before learning how my son died. I only knew he was gone. That was a wound with no edges. Now Alex was placing shape around it. His voice grew quieter. "I killed him." I shut my eyes, not because I hated him, because the truth was too heavy to receive while looking at a human face. We stood there in the dark with our separate guilts touching at the edges. When I finally opened my eyes again, Alex had not moved. "It was an accident," I said. He gave a short, broken laugh with no humor in it. "That has never made it lighter." "No." I understood that. Accident did not mean harmless. It did not bring back children. For a long time I said nothing, then I asked the question that mattered more than all the others. Why are you telling me now? Calmly he said, because if I want any place in your life it can't be built on concealment. I already lost you once because I kept too much distance. I'm not repeating that mistake. The honesty of it hurt. Perhaps because it was the one thing I had almost never received from the people who claimed to love me most. I looked up at the night sky, exhaled slowly and said, I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything tonight, Alex said. Just know that I remember, and that this time I want to be here before the damage, not after. I nodded once. It was all I could give. He accepted it as though it were enough. That more than anything made me want to trust him. James and Gloria began destroying each other faster than even I expected. Success in our last life had made them careless in this one. They thought if they stood in the same places and made the same claims, the same rewards would naturally arrive. But that was the thing about stolen outcomes. Once the original engine was removed, the machine revealed itself to be mostly noise. James failed to secure an internal project he had counted on. Then he failed again and again. He started borrowing money to maintain appearances, expensive dinners, branded watches, memberships he could not really afford yet. In our past life I had covered those costs through savings, loans, and eventually the sale of my father's land. This time there was no quiet woman smoothing the road beneath his shoes. Gloria's acting career launched quickly but unevenly. She got signed, yes, but first not under Alex's golden first-rate entertainment company that helped boost her image like rocked. Secondly, without the invisible protection Alex had once extended as her husband, every small scandal cut deeper. She arrived late, fought with stylists, flirted where she should have listened. She mistook attention for leverage and leverage for loyalty. And because she believed James had once been the source of her growth, she clung to him harder each time her career slipped, pressuring him to correct every of her mistakes and pave even higher grounds for her. James too squeezed into every little connection he had to try create wave for her, hopping to build her name into a strong kite he could stand and float on, but the more he patched the more she tore, till he was milked dry of both connections and finances. Their romance, so triumphant at the reunion, soon turned into a chain of complaints. He thought she was expensive, she thought he was underperforming, he wanted stability, she wanted status. They fed each other fantasies and rescented the bill when it came due. I did nothing. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need revenge. All I had to do was withhold rescue. One evening, while I was finishing a report at home, my phone buzzed with Gloria's name. I stared at it until it stopped. Then it rang endlessly till I finally picked up. What? Gloria sounded breathless. Lily, thank God. James is in trouble at work and I thought maybe you could talk to someone. I leaned back in my chair. Why would I? A pause, then wounded disbelief, beautifully performed, because we're friends. I looked at the spreadsheet open on my laptop and thought of all the times friendship had apparently meant handing her first pick of everything I wanted. No, I said mildly. We were classmates. You just got used to treating that like ownership. Her breath sharpened. Are you still upset about the reunion? How long are you going to punish me for being honest? I smiled to myself. There were moments when Gloria made cruelty too easy. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm just not volunteering to save you. Learn the difference. I hung up before she could answer. The next day James cornered me near the lift. He looked tired. Older, not physically, but in that inward way men age when admiration stops arriving on schedule. Lily, can we talk privately? He asked with urgency, yet I gave a standard, firm no. He lowered his voice. Why are you acting like I don't matter to you? I actually laughed. The sound made him flinch. James, I said very gently, you don't. His face hardened. You used to love me. That was before I developed taste. The lift doors opened behind me right then, and for once I thanked fate for punctuality. I stepped inside and left him standing there with an expression halfway between rage and disbelief. When the doors shut, I caught my own reflection in the polished metal and barely recognized it. Not because I looked different, because I looked unafraid. If Alex noticed the way my walls were shifting, he was wise enough not to rush them. He simply remained. That steadiness became the most persuasive language I had ever known. He listened when I spoke about work as though my ambitions were interesting for reasons beyond decoration. He remembered details. He sent food when I forgot to eat. He once drove 40 minutes to pick me up after my car battery died and never mentioned the inconvenience. When I snapped at him one particularly bad day after a nightmare about my past life's living room, he only asked if I wanted company or silence. No man had ever asked me that before. I chose company. He stayed for 2 hours and said almost nothing. Somehow that was when I started falling. Not all at once, not dramatically, just in little pieces. The first time I laughed without checking myself. The first time I looked for him in a room. The first time I caught Gloria watching us together with confusion curdling into envy. The first time I realized Alex had never once spoken badly of James or Gloria in front of me unless the truth required it. He didn't need to lower them to raise himself. That kind of restraint was rarer than beauty. One Sunday, he took me to a quiet hillside outside the city. No fanfare. Just a drive, a thermos of tea, wind moving through long grass. We sat on the hood of his car while late afternoon light turned everything soft. I used to think love meant endurance, I said suddenly. I thought about it. About selling land, swallowing humiliation, doing unpaid labor in marriage until exhaustion looked like devotion. About staying because leaving felt like failure. About calling sacrifice love simply because no one had taught me a better name. Then I thought about silence that didn't demand performance. Tea poured without asking, space respected, truth told even when it hurt the teller. Now I think love might be safety, I said. Alex's expression changed in that quiet way his expressions often did, not dramatically but deeply. Then I can do that, he said. I looked at him. He did not fill the moment with promises. He did not decorate it. Just 4 words. I leaned my head against his shoulder very lightly. He went perfectly still. A smile touched my mouth despite myself. Relax, I murmured. It's only a shoulder. His voice came low and rough. Not to me. I should have moved away. Instead, I stayed. That evening when he drove me home, he walked me to my door and did not ask for anything, so I kissed him first, only once, soft, brief. But when I drew back, the look in his eyes almost undid me, not hunger. Relief, as if some impossible sentence in his life had finally found its final word. I touched his sleeve, suddenly shy for the first time in years. I still don't know what to do with all of this, but I know I want you around. Barely, I admitted. I'll work with barely. He said satisfied. He always would. That I was starting to understand was the whole point. The true collapse started 6 months later. James was investigated for irregularities tied to a project he had mishandled and then tried to patch through unofficial payments. Without me to structure the finances cleanly, every shortcut he once took with my hidden assistance now looked exactly like what it was. Clumsy risk. Gloria's company, already irritated by her unprofessional behavior, banned her from accepting any deals. She called me seeking sympathy. I blocked her number. James came to my apartment once. I did not let him in. He stood outside my door and said, "You owe me at least a conversation." I answered through the wood, "No, what I owed you was divorce. I should have done it sooner in the life where I actually married you." He went silent, then dangerously soft. "What did you say?" I smiled at the locked door. Let him wonder. He left 10 minutes later after threatening, pleading, and calling my name in 3 different emotional registers. None worked. A month after that, Gloria was photographed drunk outside a club, getting beaten up by a rich CEO's wife, who discovered she had contracted STD from her husband, who was supposedly having an affair with Gloria. The videos spread everywhere, followed by proof of Gloria's other escapade with other ick men in her attempt to climb up the social ladder. Comment sections ate Gloria alive. Even more humiliating was it when videos of the confrontation between James and Gloria, after James had also found out he had contracted the disease. James pushed the blame to Gloria only to have his own dirty activities thrown on his face by his raging affair partner. They had become a spectacle before the whole world. Watching them implode should have made me triumphant. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Perhaps that was healing. Revenge fantasies require hunger. I was slowly becoming full. When I told Alex that, he looked at me for a long moment and said, "Good." "Why is that good?" I asked in confusion. "It means they no longer occupy the center of your life." He answered smiling. He was right. That was the real victory, not their suffering, my freedom from needing it. By then, Alex and I had become something impossible to deny, not dramatic, not loud, just real. He came over often, cooked badly but earnestly. Left files on my dining table and his watch by my sink. Kissed me like a man still surprised to be allowed. Learned the exact way I liked my tea. Sat with me through the few nights when the past still climbed into bed before sleep could. And one night when rain tapped softly against the windows and the city outside felt very far away, I asked him, "Why did you really keep your distance from me in the last life?" We were lying side by side, lights off, his hand resting over mine. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because every time I looked at you, you were looking at James like he was the answer to a prayer, and I had no right to interrupt someone else's answered prayer." My throat tightened. "You are an idiot," I whispered. A short laugh escaped him. "I know." I turned onto my side and looked at him in the dark. I wasted so much on the wrong person. His fingers tightened gently around mine. "Maybe, but you're here now." There it was again, not denial of pain, not dismissal of loss, just an insistence on the present. I moved closer and pressed my forehead to his chest. His heart beat steady under my ear, strong, living, mine to choose this time, not stumble past. Alex, I said quietly, if we do this properly. He didn't breathe. I smiled against his shirt. Try not to look so terrified. I'm trying not to ruin the moment by sounding desperate. Too late, I teased. That made him laugh softly. I lifted my head and looked at him. If we do this properly, I repeated, I don't want a life built on ghosts. I want one built on decisions, clear ones, honest ones. He reached up and touched my hair back from my face with infinite care. Then here's one, he said. I love you. I loved you before. I love you now. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that loving you can be a place to rest, not a place to break. I closed my eyes for a second, because some happiness is sharp when you've once believed yourself permanently barred from it. Then I opened them and answered with the simplest truth I had. Yes. Before the year ended, James was dismissed from his company and charged to court for embezzlement of company's funds. Gloria's acting career had completely collapsed. Tagged as a whore and a disease carrier, she couldn't even show her face in public and had gone into hiding. At Alex's welcome party as CEO of Ford Corp, I caught a familiar glimpse of a sorry figure dressed in a clean black and white tuxedo holding a tray carrying glasses of wine. Even though I had recognized him, I wasn't obligated to give him any attention. James looked at me with something sour, regretful yet resentful. As we drove out of the grand hall, another sorry figure jumped before our ride. I stepped out of the car with Alex's help. Gloria looked at my hand in Alex's and went pale. Understanding had finally reached her. Not all of it, never all, but enough. Enough to realize that the life she had mocked in her last marriage had actually been the better fate. Enough to realize that James's glory had not followed him because it had never belonged to him. Enough to realize that Alex, the man she poisoned and betrayed for being beneath her, had stood up beside me and become exactly the future she thought she had cleverly selected elsewhere. Yet she said stiffly, Lily, you deceived me. I returned a mocking smile. You deceived yourself. You fed your ego with fantasies and greed and stole a fate that should have belonged to someone else, all because you were jealous. No. You knew, yet you hid the truth cause you wanted me to fall into the trap. Give me back the life you stole from me. She shrieked, lurching at me with a knife she dug out of her scrappy cloak. I stood where I was unblinking. Before she could get 5 steps closer to me, she was tackled down by the numbers of hidden bodyguards Alex had assigned to accompany us. On the floor, she kept shrieking at the top of her voice like a woman that had lost her mind. Perhaps seeing me enjoying a life that could have been hers caused her to lose her mind. I walked to her gently and whispered, if you hadn't made stealing what belonged to others a habit, perhaps fate would not have chosen to make the joke. It was the cruelest truth. Alex's hand at my waist tightened slightly as we walked away. Later in the car, he asked, are you all right? I looked out at the city lights and thought of the woman I had once been, bleeding, furious, bewildered, unable to understand why giving everything had brought so little mercy. Then I thought of the woman I was now, alive, respected, loved carefully, no longer reaching for people who only valued what they could take from me, and I smiled. Yes, I said, I think this is the first time I've really meant that. He took my hand and kissed my knuckles like it was a private vow. A few months after that, I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the test for a very long time, not because I was unhappy, because joy after grief sometimes arrives wearing grief's perfume. It smells almost the same at first. It takes a moment to distinguish one from the other. When I told Alex, he sat down, just sat. I blinked at him. That's your reaction. He looked up at me with eyes already shining. I'm trying not to scare you by crying too hard. I laughed so suddenly I had to cover my mouth. Then he stood, crossed the room, cupped my face in both hands and kissed me with a reverence that made my own eyes sting. This time, he whispered against my forehead, this time, yes, this time there would be no loveless marriage, no betrayal hiding under dinner conversations, no child caught between broken adults and their selfishness, no woman bleeding on the floor while the people around her calculated profit. This time I was raising my child in a home that knew the difference between possession and care. This time, love would not be a test I had to survive. It would be a place I could live. And sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and Alex's arm was warm around my waist, I would remember that round table from the reunion, the cheap flowers, the ugly banner, the smug certainty on James and Gloria's faces when they thought they had chosen the winning future. I used to think being reborn was about getting revenge. It wasn't. It was about getting another chance to choose correctly. James and Gloria chose greed again. Alex chose patience, and I at last chose myself first. Everything good came after that.